A reading from the Gospel according to John. Hear what the Spirit says to the church. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This is he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me.'" From his fullness we have received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So there's a bit of folklore around Epiphany that at midnight on Epiphany Eve, the barnyard animals gain the ability to speak. Now there are several variations on this, with a commonly known version saying that it's actually Christmas Eve when this happens, and that the animals kneel in reverence or perhaps pray rather than speak. But in Appalachia, where I grew up, the mystical animal behavior is associated with Old Christmas, as it's called, celebrated on January 6th. And in Italy and other parts of Europe, it's also an Epiphany thing. I mentioned specifically the Italian version because I find it especially charming. It warns you to give your critters lots of treats here at the end of the Christmas season, or else they'll gossip badly about you tomorrow night. So whether we want to situate the legend here at Epiphany or at Christmas, whether we decide to situate this Sunday as the last Sunday of Christmas or the Sunday marking Epiphany, because I couldn't quite make up my mind, the legend speaks to a sort of fascination we have with the animals in the Christmas story. There are living nativity scenes like the one this church has hosted in the past, adorable costumes for children, the hymn we'll sing after the sermon, and of course, the thrilling moment in What Child Is This? When we all get to sing a bad word in church about the ox and ass feeding. You know, it's interesting because neither Luke nor Matthew's account of Jesus' births mentions the animals at all. I suppose their presence is heavily implied by the whole manger setting, but they don't talk or kneel or pray or warrant any mention. In fact, it was none other than St. Francis of Assisi, the famous patron of animals and nature, who first included a real ox and donkey at a living nativity scene in Greccio, Italy. Francis said of his motivations, "I want to do something that will recall the memory of that child who was born in Bethlehem, to see with bodily eyes the inconveniences of his infancy, how he lay in the manger, and how the ox and ass stood by. It's now hard to imagine a nativity scene without them." The inclusion of the ox and donkey specifically comes not from the Gospels, as we just mentioned, but from Isaiah, where the prophet says at the very beginning, "I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's crib, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand." Now, Christians have sometimes read into this that the ox being ritually clean and the donkey being ritually unclean represent the Jewish and Gentile peoples united around the crib of God, the Christ child. I'm less inclined to overwork the Hebrew scriptures to exclusively Christian ends in quite that way, which would far exceed how a Jewish audience would have ever received those words. But this is the commonly cited reason for the inclusion of the ox and donkey specifically in manger scenes. I'm more interested, though, in this idea from the Isaiah passage that the animals have some knowledge, or we might say wisdom, that God's people don't seem to get. John Calvin understood this passage in much the same way, saying that the people needed to be taught in the school of beast, not men. He wrote, "God sends them the oxen and asses to learn from them what is their duty. Nor ought we wonder at this, for the beast frequently observe the order of nature more correctly and display greater kindness than men themselves." And so while I don't think Isaiah was foreshadowing the manger stall in this passage, and neither, it's worth noting, did Calvin, who said of anyone who read the ox and ass into the nativity scene, and I quote, "They show themselves to be egregious, let's go with donkeys." Nevertheless, I still find the evocation of this idea of the school of beast alongside the birth of Jesus to be enlightening, particularly as we consider the distinctly other Christmas account we heard today in John 1. So after spending so much time these last few weeks in some mashup of Luke and Matthew's Christmas stories, I like coming up on the prologue in John in the lectionary. The synoptic birth narratives capture one side of truth, the humble birth of Jesus to an unwed mother in a manger. The presence of barn animals does speak to that humility. John 1, with its great poetic splendor, touches on the other side of truth, the cosmic Christ. Really drives home the point that this sweet little story is a really big deal, like a cosmically big deal, in which all the creatures, like the oxen and donkeys, are a part. So rather than stressing creaturely humility, such a reading makes them all participants in the significance of it. The prologue, as we heard, takes us back to a primordial eternity. Its opening lines, "In the beginning," recall the beginning of Genesis. It's also said that this poem may well have been a midrash, which is a genre of Jewish biblical interpretation, of another creation story contained in Proverbs 8. It thus ties the word, Christ, to the figure of wisdom from the book of Proverbs. Now, John uses the Greek word logos throughout the prologue, which is translated as word. Logos also connotes reason, which is where we get the word logic from, and is itself closely tied to this concept of wisdom and orderliness. In both the Gospel of John and the book of Proverbs, we hear that this logos, or wisdom, was with God at the very beginning of creation. All things came into being through this logos, John says, while Proverbs describes wisdom as the master worker, or perhaps chief architect of creation. So in this concept of word, reason, wisdom, Christ, in that concept is built the design of all that is, human and more than human alike. John's gospel thus implicates everything that is and ever was and ever will be, and tells us that the incarnation event is of life-giving significance to it all. So when I think about the Word made flesh in this way, of Christmas through the John lens, I find it reverberates through all that is. Wisdom, by which we and the barn animals and the trees and the stars were all created, became embodied and lived among us. Designed by wisdom, Creation itself recognizes in Christ the image in which it was made. And so it just makes sense that all of creation would join in that praise. Perhaps it is even that all the rest of creation does so in a way we ought to learn from. You might even say in the school of beast. I especially love the way Reformed theologian Belden Lane captures this idea. It's a kind of earthy praise that we can learn from. He writes, "The unself-conscious simplicity of the earth's creatures, mirroring God by their very being, invites the human heart to share in this common praise." So while it is in many ways extra-textual, the maybe only imagined prominence of the animals at Christ's birth and the mythology of speaking animals on Epiphany Eve orient us towards that common praise, invite us to join in it, and remind us of our interconnectedness by and through wisdom. I'm sure we all have different experiences of connecting with the wisdom of creatures. A way I think several of us may share is captured in Wendell Berry's poem, "The Peace of Wild Things," which goes like this. "When the despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free." The lessons we learn can offer a reprieve from the demands of our artificially busy world and the anxieties that attend to it. A reprieve that allows us to rest in the grace of the world. Grace upon grace. The School of Beasts, of course, also has much to teach us about being better stewards of the earth. As any parent whose child loves polar bears knows well, it's a poignant moment trying to justify to a child why we continue to drive a car everywhere we go after they've just learned about the dangers of climate change to their favorite Arctic animals. But to share how I've been learning from animals most recently, I've been reading a book about the different Umwelten of animals called An Immense World by Ed Yong. Umwelt is the perception of the world created by a species' unique sensory organs and their different capacities. So a dog and a bat and a butterfly all have wildly different experiences of the world from one another and from us. It's incredible, really. There is a fullness to all of reality that we can only sense a piece of. So knowing that a mantis shrimp has 13 more color receptive cones in its eyes to my mere 3, or that my dog can perceive past, present, and future stories of a place with her nose, that all humbles me. And it reminds me, too, of the fullness of God, far past my limited capacity to understand. Now, Yong writes of the senses that they transform the coursing chaos of the world into perceptions and experiences. They pull relevance from randomness and weave meaning into miscellany. They connect animals to their surroundings, and they connect animals to each other. That to me hints at the wisdom of the ordered world, wisdom that connects us and that we get to reflect back. And I find I am overcome with wonder at the immensity of God's glory in it all. So I will venture to say that I do believe that